Joining us here at the St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center Speaker Series. As always, we love having you here at the Oris. Dick is such a great host. Let's give him a round of applause. How many members do we have here? Raise your hand. Lots. That's great. We'd love to see that. If you're not a member, you can always join. And tonight's admission can be applied to your membership if you like. We are solely supported by admissions, memberships, gift shop sales, a grant here and there, and sponsorships, much like tonight's presentation, which is sponsored by Bryant Restoration. Give it up! Genevieve Art Colony was once called the Mecca of Midwestern art. And here to tell us about it is Carolyn Bach, who is the president of the St. Genevieve Art Guild, art liaison for the Women's Club of St. Genevieve, member of the Foundation for Restoration of St. Genevieve, and a volunteer at the St. Genevieve Museum. Now, when I say volunteer, she does so much more. She does research. She helps in the archives with Tom Greminger, who's hanging around here. But if you haven't seen the Rocher Audubon display, that's all Carolyn's baby. She researched the whole thing, put the whole thing together, and it is a marvelous display. So we hope you have a chance to see it if you haven't already. Let's see. She holds a master's degree from Washington University and is attracted to topics that combine art and history. Her presentation tonight is brought to you by Bryant Restoration, so please welcome Carolyn Bach.
For inviting me here tonight. I'm here to talk about the Art Colony. In putting all this together, I was looking at some of the artwork and some of the photographs and really came up with some revelations that I hadn't had before, and I want to share those with you. The first one was looking at this particular painting, which has been one of our favorites. Anyway, the architecture down here has just been something that people really appreciate. And it reminded me that when my husband Bob and I came down here, it'll be 20 years ago next June. Husband Bob, hi. He and I were looking for a place to be. We've been away from the area for 20 years, came back, did not want to be in the big city, wanted to be somewhere somewhat rural, and looked all over the place and came into town because somebody had said, you need to come pick up a listing. Drove into the title office to pick the listing up, got out of the car, and got goosebumps. This place is the place. This really did it for me, and I understand why the artists that were coming down from St. Louis felt the same way. And so that's kind of what started the whole idea of the Art Colony. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Brenda Bosworth for actually suggesting this, and it took us a while to get around to it, but we're pleased to have this. I will be talking as we go about two books, and I'll refer to them as the little book and the big book. The big book is out of print, and so I'm here to tell you the little book is available. And Nick Donzie is here. Nick, raise your hand, and he's waving a book. The book was published by the Foundation for Restoration of St. Genevieve in 1998. So it's only $10, and I'm just giving it a plug. Think about it as I'm talking about the Art Colony and this book. If you would like one, Nick has them. So I'll go to the next slide. And we'll talk about what the heck is an art colony? You know, why did people come? Why did you want a colony? And you know, when we talk about this, sometimes the word colony and the word art guild just come out simultaneously. An art guild is open to everybody. An art guild tries to foster art in the community, all that kind of stuff. But an art colony is people that actually come and live together for a whole summer. And it's, after reading about it a lot, it's kind of a party. It was fashionable. It started in Europe. People got together, and it was, you know, like they call a little bohemia. It was sort of a little bohemia. Everything went. They talked politics. They had parties. They had fun. There were practical reasons for it. They wanted to get out of the city in the summer. Working together was a good idea. If you went to a remote location, it was cheaper. So that was another thing. But this picture here, by the way, I've ripped pictures off of several books, so I'm unashamedly borrowing images from everywhere because this isn't a publication. But this image is of a man named Charles Hawthorne, who on the East Coast in Cape Cod kind of held court. He was the artist at the time among people who were doing this kind of thing. He was a very strict taskmaster, but he was also had a huge following. He was a bit of a rock star. And so our people that were part of our art colony had actually been there to Cape Cod and listened to this man talk about art. And they were very, very impressed with the whole idea. So this is the idea of an art colony. Next slide. So why have an art colony here? Well, it's the Depression. It's 1930, 1932. It's too expensive to go to Cape Cod. And the highway from St. Louis to St. John has just been paved. Anna gave me this great article. It was Highway 25 back then. And so they had a reason to come down here more easily. Of course, there was a train, but people like to come by car. Regionalism, we'll be talking about that. The whole idea that artists should paint in your own area. This was kind of a reaction to the idea that you had to go to Europe to be a good artist. You had to go to Paris. You had to learn from the masters that were all in Europe. And the reaction among some of the people here was, let's create some American art. It sounds a little provincial, but that was the whole idea behind the regionalism movement. And particularly took hold in the Midwest. This was be in the heartland thing. So right about 1930, St. Genevieve becomes a hot topic because it's got all of the requirements. It's not too far from the city. It's picturesque as all get out. And people start coming down here to check us out. I love this photograph. On the left, we have Bernard Peters with the hat and the shorts and the socks. It's wonderful. They have packed a lunch for the day. The original story is Peters was talked into it by a fellow artist, and the four of them, the two men and their wives, came down to St. Genevieve to check it out. And when they got here, they ran into Matt Ziegler. Next slide, please. Bernie Peters was a teacher in the St. Louis Public Schools. He had the summers off. He does these fantastic landscapes. They're just really, really beautiful in the style of the Impressionists. He's looking for a nice quiet place to paint. He and his wife Ord had no kids, but not much money, a fact of which Ord is constantly reminding him that they have no money, honey. And when you look at Ord, you can kind of get the idea that she's the one watching the money, okay? And sadly, Bernie has a terminal illness, so he's kind of just wanting to take it easy. Next slide. So like I said, he runs into Matt Ziegler. So we're going to introduce Matt Ziegler here. He begins painting in oil at age 21. He comes from an artistic family. So the family includes his aunt, Sister Cassiana Marie, and if any of you came to our promenade exhibit last year, you got a whole story on Sister Cassiana Marie. He has a cousin from Germany that is artist Joe Borst. If you came to the promenade before that, you got Joe Borst. So we've been covering these artists one by one. Grew up on the family farm. This guy can do anything. He knows how to fix anything. He's really a Renaissance man, if you will. So it's a chance meeting. It depends on who you ask. When Matt, years later, and he kind of cleans up pretty good for a farmer, don't you reckon? When they was asked years later, how did this all start? He, of course, said, oh, I was standing by the road with my easel painting, you know. But when they asked Ord Peters how it all started, she said they were standing by the road painting, and he came along. So it's all depending on who you ask. But either way, Matt sees these people, and the Vogt sisters are part of the artistic family there, and they own the Shaw House. And forgive me, Jim, I still call it the Shaw House. It's now the Bozier something or another. I don't. Yeah. I should call it the Shaw House. Okay. And this is what it looked like in 32. No dormers, no paint. This is the Shaw House. It's available for rent. The ladies up there will own it jointly, but it's empty. There's a lot of empty houses in 1932. So Matt says, hey, I've got this house. Says, how much? Or it says, we can't afford it. So Peters goes back to St. Louis, next slide. And he finds one of his friends from the St. Louis Artists Guild. The St. Louis Artists Guild had kind of everybody that was anybody who was in that group. So she agrees to jointly lease the Shaw House. She didn't need much convincing. She'd already been down here. Several of the people had already been down here. Jessie Beard Wrigley is an extremely independent, strong advocate for women's rights. She takes her art very seriously. She feels very strongly that women artists should have the same standing as men artists, and of course that's not true in 1932. She formed her own art club up there in St. Louis, and she invites like-minded people down to paint. There's a picture there of her. I love that smock. This was, again, the fashion of people who did, and women wore dresses or smocks. Is this echoing too badly? Am I doing okay with this? Okay. This is one of the portraits she paints. This is Tilly. Tilly is a black woman who was 10 years old when the free times came. And this is the kind of subject matter that Jessie wants to paint. Next slide. So, 1932 ends with a huge exhibit. And it also, by this time, includes Amy Schweg. Amy Schweg is considered a founder. She had been coming down here since 1930, sometimes with her young daughter. And she's Jessie's best friend at the time. Very significant connections up in St. Louis. So Jessie is considered a founder because the only thing lacking was a place to rent. So once Jessie had that figured out, brought Amy down, everything was good. They had a show, an exhibition of paintings at the end of the season, and they had a whole crew of artists that had come down over the summer and had painted off and on, and everybody put their art in the show. Jessie made this. She was good at making these block prints. And what was amazing is 200 people signed the register on Saturday, and that were people all from St. Louis. If we got 200 people from St. Louis at one of our shows, we would be in hot heaven. So the argument can be made that this was the beginning of heritage tourism. when we were doing the presentation on the bicentennial of Bill, that was considered perhaps the start of cultural heritage tourism, because so many people found out about St. Genevieve through the bicentennial. But Colonel Rickley made the argument that this was actually the start of people coming down here, being aware of the picturesque place, being aware of the historical houses, all of that. So 200 came on Saturday. On Sunday, they invited the people locally. They got 200 more people. And so this was quite the thing. Everybody was curious. They wanted to come down and see what this was all about. And so it had quite a following. This self-portrait of Amy Schweg is a painting that I have seen in person. I say in person because you get the feeling you're standing in front of that person. This is painted entirely with a palette knife. The palette knife was what was advocated by her mentor, Charles Hawthorne. It is just a showstopper when you see it in reality. Speaking of seeing paintings in person, I had a wonderful surprise tonight from Georgiana, who brought this painting all the way from Cape Girardeau, am I right? Okay. All right, let me see if I can do this. Anna, will you come help me here?
It's a two-person job.
Yeah. Anna is our art historian with the Art Guild. Anna is a charter member of the Art Guild. It has been around since 1983. And we depend on her so much for art. This is an awesome painting by Jessie Beard Rickley. Georgiana's husband's family knew Jessie Beard Rickley. And the surprise is there's a painting on the back.
It's perfect.
And so if you lift up, there's a painting on the back. Okay. So
I can see part of Tillich. Of course, this is a different woman. But when I saw that painting of Tillich by Jessie Beard,
Yes, yes.
I can see that.
yes,
When we took this to be framed,
yes.
the framer called and said, "Which one do you want framed?" And we said, "What?"
Which one do you want framed, the front or the back?
Often it was depression.
Yeah.
And supplies were very limited. We did find this at other times. We have found this also.
Is it the same panel or two separate?
I think it's the same plant, don't you, Bill?
When we were private when my parents died, and at that time it was a different frame. It didn't really look good on our wall, and so we took it in the frame to the framer, and that was when they called and said, "Which one are we supposed to frame?"
And I think it's the same plant.
So they did it. I think it's they did it so you could look at both sides.
Yeah.
Pass it, put it up, and everybody enjoy it. We love it. And
Oh.
Bill's sister in St. Louis has another.
Oh, wow.
And we invited her to come join us. It's just
Uh-huh.
a great meeting place,
Oh,
but she
yeah.
could not tonight. So
Yeah.
maybe another time she'll be.
Yeah, maybe another time, yeah. Maybe you could come to our promenade. I left postcards on everybody's table. We're having a special exhibit of one of the colony artists starting in July, so that would be a good time too. That painting is, I'm pretty sure, on a wood panel. The one that we have at the, well, I say at the museum, it's the old museum building, but it's the art center now, is on a panel. And so Jessie, I think, pretty much painted on panel. Okay. So everybody's happy at the end of the year. Chamber of Commerce is happy. All these people came down and discovered St. Genevieve. The artists are happy. Some of them sold paintings and they've got their work exhibited. Except maybe one person. Next slide. I said there were 4 crises that happened. This is the first one. Bernie Peters is not happy. He came down here to paint natural beauty. And what's going on is a lot of political discussion about the philosophy of painting. art should have a message. Art should talk about all of the terrible things that are happening during the Depression. And it should reflect what's going on with the country. Bernie just wants to create beauty. And I'm worried that if it hadn't been for a friend, he might have not stayed with the colony, which would have been terrible. Jules Ballet, which is a name people may know, returned to his St. John roots in 1930. He had been born up in St. Louis. His father had moved up there with his father, which is the man in the painting. The man in the painting is Jules Ballet's grandfather. Jules felt he took after the grandfather. He was very proud of his roots. He came back here. He was a very generous man with the family's money that they had earned through a lot of iron mining and so forth. You guys can fill me in on that. But anyway, he helps Bernie out by another empty house. This one is in St. Mary's. It was called the Shaft House. It's now the White Cliff Manor. When I spoke to Brian Helms, who owns the White Cliff Manor a few years ago, he shared with me that the family was not too happy about having this itinerant artist in their building because, he didn't take care of it because he didn't have the money. So the porch was not in good shape when he left. But evidently, Jules Ballet had given it to him for a song, and he hadn't really been, it wasn't a normal transaction. So Jules was doing this man a favor, and he was doing the art community a favor too, because this was something good for the community. Bernie continued to teach. He continued to be part of the colony because he had this retreat. He had a place he could be where he could create his art. In exchange, or as a commission, he painted Valley family portraits. And this one of his grandfather is at the Gibor Valley house. Next slide. So with Bernie kind of out of the way, Rickley and Schweg just take off. These two become a team. They're painting the same thing. The first two up at the top are a Schweg and a Rickley of the town barbers. The barbers were so flattered at being painted, they went and put a tie on and combed their hair and got all, revved up about having the portrait painted. These two portraits are hanging at the Jean-Baptiste Ballet House, and they're part of the Women's Club collection, which I'll talk about later. The two of them went to the cemetery, and they painted together again. Amy and Jesse had a whole different take on the same scene, and that was part of the whole object of doing it. And then we get these lovely photos because Amy's husband is Martin Schweg, who's a professional photographer. And so we get a lot of great public relations images from this. Okay, next. So 1933 ends with a Rickley Schweg exhibit. And that is at the brand new St. Genevieve Museum and Library, which is now the Art Center. And those two paintings I see a lot of because they have been in that building ever since it opened. When it opened, they had the show. Rickley donated a painting, Schweg donated a painting to show support for the college. The fact that they were able to have a show at that point was really a tribute to the art colony itself. It showed how the art colony was accepted by the community, that they would open a public building like that and have an art show in it. So that was really cool. We're really proud of that, being an art center now, that we have that history. So those two paintings are owned by the Museum Learning Center. They're on long-term loan to us. The painting of Father Van is something Amy did because she really, really, really liked Father Van. He was a supporter of the art colony. When they started the summer school, he actually took a bunch of the students over to Fort Sharp on a field trip. So he was very much into what was going on. He liked the cultural side of all of this. And the other painting, called Easter, I think is really cool because it's actually painted at the corner across the street from the Art Center. And that big tree there is something that's going to show up a little later. But it's painted from the corner where the DeBerg Center is. And the steps are the original steps on the church. Where the car is actually going to be pretty much the corner of the new building. The museum building was built in 4 months at a cost of about $4,000. It was pretty incredible. It was a community thing. Everybody pulled together and made that happen. They did it in 33 because they had so much going on to get ready for, where's Roy? The bicentennial, there he is, in 35. So they got this museum going and out of the way so they could concentrate on the rest of it. Next slide. So what the other thing that had been happening is 33 is that Jesse and Amy had been talking consistently about let's do our own summer school of art. So they've been planning it all year. And they're going to set it up just like their mentor, Hawthorne, in Provincetown. And so I like the headline there, the old St. Genevieve First Summer Art Colony in the Middle West, because there was another art colony in the Middle West. It started at exactly the same time, middle of 1932. And it was headed up by a guy named Grant Wood. I don't know if any of you know the guy with the pitchfork and the lady next to him in front of the house. Okay, that was Grant Wood. He was another person that people would follow to an art colony. And so they had started a school. They got a little too ambitious. It lasted exactly 2 years. So our summer school actually picked up a few people that would have gone to their summer school. But that kind of illustrates that this was not an easy thing to do, nor was it a venture that was guaranteed to succeed by any means. But I like their advertisement. The students came for sound instruction, painting from the model, landscape, still life, by teachers of high reputation and recognized ability. Now, Jesse and Amy were the two teachers at the time, and that is not an overstatement. They were quite able, they were quite good. But again, it's the two of them, and that's how it is going forward. And I love the hats at the bottom. And I can't get over how dressed up people got back then to go painting. I mean, my gosh, an outfit like that, you're gonna, worry about getting paint on it. So they're all painting on the same thing. There's a model standing in the back. You can't quite make it out. But this is in St. Genevieve in a yard somewhere. Next slide. Okay, the location of the summer school. I had heard about it, but I had no idea where it was. And so I had asked Anna, our historian, and she told me it was the old kindergarten building. And so there was a lovely picture in Bill's book that I grabbed. And then I asked Bob Mueller, and he came up with this wonderful map. Thank you, Bob. Because I love maps, and this, for me, kind of painted the picture a little better. That the show house up at the top is on the same street as what became the summer school. And the part I like about the article that Bob sent, I don't know if you can read it all from here, is the art students gave their first annual costume party at the Rickley Schwag Studio. Well, the Rickley Schwag Studio was the Shaw House. That was what they called the downstairs. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs, and that's where they slept. And so they shared all of that as part of their studio. The costumes were very colorful and original. After games were played, the group went to the Village Inn. And that used to be a pizza parlor in my day, but the Village Inn was actually, and I didn't include the ad that Bob sent, but the Village Inn was all part of that same complex. This was part of the summer school building. It was a restaurant. And after the Village Inn, it lasted for 1 year, Matt Ziegler started up something called the Coffee Pot. I think that was in probably the same area. But this is where the school was, and it's a classroom, studio, and restaurant area for the summer school students. The summer school students were actually living in people's houses. They were put up by the local residents. And that was something arranged, usually by Matt Ziegler. Okay, next slide.
Hey, Carolyn, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
On that previous one?
Yep.
The farm map that you have there, you put the labels on that, right?
Yeah, I did.
The dog and school.
Yeah, I did.
So
I
that
put the
was-
labels.
that
No,
was
the
part
labels
of
were
it.
not on it. No. Good question. Yeah. Okay. This is again talking about Matt Ziegler. Matt started as a hobbyist, and he was just painting because it was something to do. But his art and his life changed dramatically because he's hanging out with professional artists. He opens a pottery shop, and I'm quite impressed by the pottery that's sitting there on either side of him and behind him. And he's accepted into this colony. They even let him teach a little bit of landscape painting, and he opens up the farm, which is about a mile away from the school, and people come out there and paint. He brings in eggs, produce, honey, all kinds of things for the school. He's just really the welcoming presence that you need. When I was studying about art colonies, the one thing that they needed to make it succeed was somebody local that was going to be the welcoming presence, and you'll hear me talk about that again. This photo, I've really had fun with the photos because I've blown them up, and this photo has got Matt Ziegler on the left, and it's the only one I know of him where he's smiling. Every picture I've seen of that guy, and it could be the blonde that's sitting in front of him, I'm not sure. But I think the other reason he's smiling is he's standing next to the most famous painter in St. Louis. Now, Thomas Hart Benton's the most famous painter in America. Okay, he's just been on Time magazine. But the man standing next to him is named Joe Jones. Very easy name. Joe Jones actually helped Matt quite a bit. He actually helped promote him as an artist. And I think that's the other reason he was accepted into the colony is he came a long way. Wish I had some of that pottery. That'd be great. Next slide. Okay, then we get to the second crisis. Something's troubling Jessie Rickley. She was supposed to be co-director of the school. She creates all the little news items and invitations. This kind of thing where you have a critical person in the mix that decides they want out. That can actually mean the end of the experiment because that person was sharing all the love. These invitations, I'm going to call attention to that woodblock print there because we're going to see that again as an actual painting. Amy is determined. She digs in, and this is going to succeed. The Church Picnic is one of my favorite paintings by Amy. This is classic regionalism, where you're portraying something with everyday life, and it's done so well and so colorfully. I'm going to talk about Jessie Rickley a little more as we go, because we don't really know what the problem was. But I have a theory, and I'll show you in a minute. Next slide. So here comes Joe Jones as an actual teacher for the first time. He's co-director, and when you say co-director, what that means is you're stuck with all the teaching. You're not just sitting in the office somewhere watching what's going on, you're actually teaching. And he sets up a class in mural painting for those interested in public art. And you can see here, this is in 32, he's on a ladder, creating quite a spectacular mural for his students, and he himself later won commissions for post office murals. I'll be showing some of that in a little bit. been a regular visitor to the colony every year, so he's no stranger to this, and he's quite a good friend of Amy Schwegg's. So here Amy replaces Jesse with the star attraction, Joe Jones. Next slide. And there were two other people that were here in 1935, and it was Oscar Thallinger and Fred Conway. Oscar Thallinger was raised in Europe. He has a European accent. He has a lot of background, and he is the registrar at the St. Louis Art Museum. He becomes Amy's right hand as the second co-director. And there was something about this picture that answered my question about Jessie Rickley. Amy's got her arm around Oscar. Those two were friends with their husbands and all this stuff for a long time. And thinking back about Jessie Rickley, back in the 60s, would have been called a women's order, okay? She was somewhat angry that as a woman she wasn't taken seriously. And she and Amy had been running the show. I mean, those two had been gangbusters. They'd been out painting, they'd been making up the summer school, they'd been teaching the classes. I really think Jessie felt they didn't need the men. Sister Cassie Anna Marie was part of an art colony up in Wisconsin that was all women. So it was not unheard of that women actually got a chance to do something in an art colony, because an art colony was extremely democratic. And they had an opportunity to show their work. The first year that they had that show, where Jessie Rickley was actually able to have a one-woman show in St. Louis because of the colony. She got such notoriety being part of this colony, and she portrayed herself as the founder. That Peterson and Schwegg had just followed her down to St. Genevieve, and she was the one who was making all this happen. And you can understand that, you know, you toot your own horn when you're having your own exhibit. But I really, really feel like she was upset that Amy was inviting all these men and giving them the responsibility, giving them the credit, giving them the publicity. But ladies, I gotta tell you, in 1935, that's the way it was. And Amy, I had to agree with Amy. For the sake of the colony, for the sake of making it what it could be and what it did become, I really think you need everybody. You don't exclude part of the group. Fred Conway had come, these guys had both been here in 35 when Jessie got all upset. Fred Conway is Mr. Personality. He's got a shock of red hair and a cackling laugh, and everybody loves him. He's got this wonderful sense of humor, and he's an excellent instructor. I think possibly Amy and Jessie had both been some of his students, because they both came through Washington University. He was teaching there from 1924, and he's just really good. He can do anything. He can do, you know, these switchy landscapes with watercolor. He can do Impressionist. He can do Cubism. The little card I passed around is one of his Cubist things. He's quite a remarkable artist. He also did murals. So we'll be featuring him, as I said, later on. It's someone we haven't featured before, so that's kind of exciting, and we're able to do that because certain people have taken an interest in collecting art, and that allows us to share that art with the public. And so that's a very significant thing. Next slide. Okay, this picture becomes, this is one taken by Martin Schwegg, and this is the rock star, Thomas Hart Benton, the most famous painter in America. Time magazine's first color cover had him on the front of it. So everybody knows his name, everybody knows about regionalism because that's what he's been promoting. He's been saying, "Hooey on the Europeans, we need our own homegrown art, and what better place to do that than the heartland? So we're going to do regionalism." It was kind of touch and go as to whether he was going to come or not. And it was actually Joe Jones that kind of persuaded him to come out here. He actually took a break from painting his famous mural in the House Lounge of the State Capitol. And he'd been in New York for a long time and was creating all kinds of interesting conversations up there about art and getting people all upset to some extent. He came back to Missouri because he was offered a teaching job at the Kansas City Art Institute and a commission to paint this mural in the Capitol building. And so those two things brought him back to Missouri. Getting him from the Capitol over to St. Genevieve was really quite something. So Amy, he had such a good time though. He says, "I'm coming back next year. I'm gonna do this again." And so Amy got all excited, used this particular picture in her brochure. Next slide. This is a touch of the regionalism that was going on, and what I've included is a portion of that Capitol building mural that was attributed to St. Genevieve. And the story was that he was inspired to do that by his visit here in 1936. That is in the upper corner, left corner of one of the walls over the doors. The other person that was really into the regionals thing was Joe Boris. I wanted to include him here because so much of what he did was right here in St. Genevieve. Those two mules were from Matt Ziegler's farm. The kid was somebody local. All of that stuff is local St. Genevieve photographs that he took. And you'll notice he's got this strap across the front of him. That's his camera. He went nowhere without that camera. And so he was always taking pictures, subject matter, for his paintings. And these we know from Anna's archives that these are all from St. Genevieve. Regionalism depicts local history, landscapes, everyday working class life. And the whole idea is to foster a distinct national identity. Next slide. I wanted to stick in something about part of our archives in the St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center. We have, thanks to Ralph W. Smith, the largest collection of his pen and ink and his prints anywhere around. There are some in storage up in St. Louis with Mississippi Line. He worked for Peerless Line, which was the predecessor to Mississippi Line. And he engineered a visit to the lime kiln for the Summer School of Art in 1936. The idea was you were painting the workers, the labor, the industry as part of this social experiment with art having a message. So Ralph was associated with the colony. He didn't actually exhibit at the colony because he wasn't a painter, but he's a plant engineer and a fine pen and ink artist. I discovered something when I say we, where's Tom? Tom Greminger. Tom and I work on the archives, and Tom carefully pulled out all the little bitty nails that were in the back of all of Ralph Smith's prints because they had been backed with cardboard. Some of them even had the name of the company on the cardboard. And so we got rid of all the cardboard, and Tom cut out some real backings for them. But what it did, by taking them out of the frame, is you could really get a good look at them. And with Anna's help, I was able to identify the ones that were actual pen and ink from the ones that were prints. The pen and inks are all from before 1934. After 1934, he somehow learned how to create, with the help of someone in St. Louis, this, which is a relief print zinc etched plate. And what you do is you roll ink onto this, put your paper down, and you can make multiple copies. One of our members had a husband who worked at Mississippi Lime at the same time, and the prints were given out as Christmas presents to everyone. So you can make multiple copies of these wonderful pen and inks that he was doing by this process. And I think the fact that it dates from 34 is maybe no coincidence. Maybe this happened because of someone he knew in the colony that knew how to do this, because you couldn't do this locally. So I've got that here if you want to look at it later. We also have the prints off of these. There's 3 of them, which is quite something. The lime kiln paintings have all this smoke coming out, and they actually went to the lime kiln during the day and the night. And these kind of look like they're maybe sort of nighttime paintings. One is done by Amy, who's on the left in the photo, and the lady holding the brush up is her daughter, Martile. Martile is her artist name, and Martile was raised as an artist. Her mother brought her to the colony when she was like 14, and she's 19 now, and she's really come into her own, as you can see on the painting at the bottom. These are also part of the Women's Club collection. And next slide. Guess what? Tom Benton doesn't show up. Which isn't a big surprise. It's a long way from Kansas City. And this is a busy man. He's a very famous man. And this is not something that was written in the history book. Okay, this is something that Carolyn kind of put together. So it's a bit of speculation on my part. But there's no evidence that he ever visited the school, because when he visited, everybody knew about it. It was publicized. There's no publicity this year at all for the 1937 season. And the only publicity that's there is a little article asking if anybody in St. Genevieve would like to come get some free instruction. So that tells me that some of the people that paid money to have your kids come down and study with Thomas Hart Benton, because if you can say you studied with a famous artist, that's a real feather in your cap. That's something you're proud of. And so I'm thinking there were some disgruntled students. Again, supposition on my part. Unfortunately, Joe Jones, who's the second most fame-worthy, is off doing a fellowship to portray the Dust Bowl. They had a series of calamities. 37 had seen a huge flood, it saw a drought, and then we have the Dust Bowl. So he got a commission, he has to go do that, so he leaves. So we've got Oscar Thallinger and Fred Conway again. Joe Jones shows up when he can, and they end the season with a ferry boat cruise, which is a very cool thing to do. We did that when we celebrated the 80th anniversary of this thing. So again, Joe Jones became noted for these harvest murals. The whole wheat idea became sort of his emblem. And this particular middle part was what was in that one relief block print that was advertised in the summer school. And we know that he actually took the classes out into a wheat field near St. Genevieve. And because that same scene appears in the invitation to the summer school, I'm drawing the conclusion that that particular mural in Charleston, Missouri represents the scene right outside St. Genevieve. And it's beautifully done. I really like it. Next slide. Oh, then things got worse. Joe Jones organized the unions. And I find it interesting that this is a second image created by Ralph W. Smith. Ironically, in 1938, there's no smoke coming out of those smokestacks because there's nobody working. Everybody is unemployed all summer long. And so there's no summer school this year. Amy saw this coming and she said, oh, no. And I think just the the whole, it had run its course. It had really presented itself in a historical context. It was a really good thing. But 1936 was a tough act to follow. Everything had gone so well that year. And 37, not so much. But that's just the summer school. The colony itself hasn't stopped. The colony is going to continue. Next slide. 39 was the year of federal mural commissions. An unusually large number of the members of the St. John Art Colony ended up getting post office commissions. Matthew Ziegler's work is at the left, and Martiel's, of course, is the mural that's in our post office. Those two people were particularly influenced by Joe Jones. He kind of coached them on how to do murals, how to get the commission application just right. And Tom Benton showing up and talking about murals didn't hurt either. But when I was giving a little talk at the Art Center about the Art Colony, I always gave credit to Thomas Hart Benton for the success of all the post office murals. I shouldn't have. It was Joe Jones. Joe Jones was the one who gave the class. Joe Jones was the one who mentored people. Joe Jones was the one who was around. Tom Benton was here for a couple of days. And because he had the headliner status, everybody gives him more credit than maybe what they should. These people had a leg up on the murals because the Treasury Fine Arts section that was judging them actually preferred regionalist art. They said, yeah, no, yes, no. Question? Oh, okay. If you were an abstract artist, you need not apply. So
That wasn't the question.
that wasn't the question. What's your question, Bill?
No, first question number one is, do you mind interrupting?
No, not at all. Please
Question
do.
number two is, are you saying that lower left piece is Matt Ziegler's? Did he do a post office mural?
Yes, Matt Ziegler did a post office mural in Flanders, North Dakota, South Dakota. Which was it? Flandreau. Thank you. Thank you. French name, of course, you would know. Okay. And North Dakota, South Dakota, one of the two. Anyway.
Do we know there's a still there?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Want to add to that? No. Okay.
If you have that.
Oh. Yeah.
Service, a couple of years ago, said, oh, that mural is being removed. And when I called the post office.
Right.
Flandreau, they said, no, it's still here, it's fine, everything's good, it's good.
Oh, that's good.
So, maybe we feel better.
Oh, good. So the mural is still there. That's great. That's great.
Thank you.
Well, I have another mural story. Have a good look at the mural here that Martiel created. And if you see the man on the left dancing, look at his shoe right above Martiel's signature. Because a postmaster cut a hole in the mural to hang a lamp. And he put a hole in this mural. Next slide. So 1940, things are kind of winding down. Amy still has a Shaw house. Martiel's off studying in Colorado with somebody that Joe Jones recommended. She's off pursuing her art career. Joe Vorst is hanging out at Matt's farm a lot. He's got into the mules as a theme in his art. And Matt continues to be the welcoming presence in town and on his farm. Bernie Peters is still in St. Mary's, and he's consistently over this time period shown up periodically. He just didn't want to live in the midst of all of it. And he will be the last one to leave and turn the lights out in 1943. His illness is finally getting to him. He'll only live for another 3 years. But the sanctuary that Jules Vallée provided this wonderful artist so he could create is just a really cool thing. Anyway, next slide. So the colony has kind of come to a conclusion. And of course, we're on the cusp of World War II. And so where we take it up again is 1945. But the colony had really created a place for American art. And it used to be that artists had to go to Paris. Well, now artists went to New York. And if you could get a solo show in New York, you had it made. And I just want to say that Jessie Beard Rickley would be extremely proud of Allie Kavanaugh. Allie, yay. You can make it there, you can make it anywhere, is that what they said? Yeah. So Allie had and what's funny is when Jessie and Amy had a show, they called it a two-man show. And, you know, it was again, you know, the reference to the whole thing. But, yeah, congratulations, Allie. So we're past the colony a bit, but the colony is not forgotten. Matt Ziegler is going to keep that cooking. He does all kinds of things. He discovers a very young Charles Reinhardt out painting letters on the side of a truck door. And because he has been associated with so many professional artists, he knows that this kid has what it takes. He has the talent, he has the eye, and he has the fine handwork that you need to be a good artist. And so, not so much a mentor, but he introduces him to the world of fine art. He takes him to the St. Louis Art Museum. He takes him painting with him. He takes him to different places where art is being created. And Charles Reinhardt takes off. He learns it himself. He's self-taught, but when we interviewed Charles, he right away said that Matt Ziegler was the guy who got him started, who really influenced him to the point of taking up fine art. Matt attempts to revive the art colony. He does so with Roscoe Misselhorn and a guy named Siegfried Reinhardt, which I always didn't want to use because it confused, he's not anything to do with the other Reinhardt. But again, picked a St. Louis artist, and it didn't go. But Roscoe Misselhorn keeps coming down here and drawing all of our buildings. He's just an enormous general. He partners with Barney and Francis Evans, and so he turns the Shaw House into the Old French Inn, which is actually the very first art gallery in St. Genevieve. He has all this art that he's collected from the time in the colony and all of his friends all around the Old French Inn. Barney's a sculptor, so now we have a sculptor in town. Matt self-publishes a couple of books he's taken up abstract painting because that's all the style now. And he's all about education. He starts his own summer school of art, which is what he calls his art instruction. He's taking art instruction to the public. He's bringing in kids from all around St. Jen in the area. And he continues to welcome everybody who wants to come down here, particularly from St. Louis. Fred Conway comes back down here and visits his friend Matt. So he kind of keeps everything going. We call Matt the keeper of the flame. Next slide. Then this is a bit of a story because it all starts with that postmaster that put a hole in the mural. The next postmaster comes along and says, "What the heck happened here?" And so he makes some connections and finds out who the artist is and invites her on a commission to come not only fix the hole, but to paint or to clean the mural, which has been up since 1942. So Martine comes back to town. Her old friend Dion Papin Schramm, lives in the Jean-Baptiste Ballet House. That's their home. It's been in the Papin family for 150 years. She has married Bernard Schramm, Bernie Schramm, who is someone who was with the St. Louis Globe Democrat. He had been a reporter, so he's perfectly placed to talk about things going on in St. Genevieve to a St. Louis audience. So they get to talking about the art colony over coffee and tea and sandwiches. And Martine says, look, we've got these paintings in my mother's house that are all about St. John. They were created during the art colony. They really should be seen down here. Let's have them on loan. Let's send them down here for jour de fête. So that happens the next year. The next year they're still down here. The year after that they're still down here. They came out for jour de fête. They were stored at the Bovic House. Finally, again, it was timing. They were breaking up house up in St. Louis. And Martine was in the process of moving to Chicago. And she says, look, I need a place for these to be transferred to. We need a nonprofit. The Women's Club was the primary art institution at the time. We didn't have a art guild in 1974. It didn't start till 83. So the company paintings are donated, and there's all the paperwork placed on exhibit in the county library. And so that's where they stay for a while. In 1980, the people that were in charge of the Felix Valley decide that there's, I'm not quite sure how this got started, but there is a colony painting show at the Felix Valley. And the head of the Historic Preservation Program, is this somebody you know? Jim? Okay, you know Dr. Overby? Are you familiar with? He's deceased, but I mean, do you know the story that he came down here and saw the paintings and went back and convinced Rogers to do his... Right.
Professor of art history.
Right. He's a professor of art history, was a professor of art history at Mizzou. The information we have from Anna, who was involved a little bit, was the James Rogers Jr. was looking for a doctoral thesis subject. And Dr. Overby, having seen the colony paintings, heard the colony story, decided to present this to Rogers and encourage him strongly to do it. The timing was critical because Rogers starts interviewing people who were still around in 1983. Unfortunately, Matt Ziegler had just passed. He died in 1981, so we weren't able to interview him. But Rogers interviewed Amy Schwegg. And she provided a lot of information. Of course, her daughter Martine was still around, and she was interviewed. The other people that were interviewed were good old Ord Peters, the one who was keeping Bernie in line. She's still around, Bernie's gone. And she had a lot to say about how the colony first came to be, because she was living in the Shaw that very first year. They had her keeping house. She was there. And the other person is Colonel Francis Rickley, which was Jesse's husband. And so we get a few insights into that side of things. So we had those four people that represented really the four key people in this whole colony experiment. And the other thing that had happened was that there was a body of information available to people who were doing research. And so this whole series of events I'm crediting to my friend Anna, who, she's shaking her head, who was able to piece it together. Because what happened was the hole in the mural resulted in a story that we would have lost. And that story is in this book that's available from our friend Nick Donzi. And that story really goes into who these people were, why they were there, and the interaction between them. So this was something that kind of got the ball rolling on the understanding of the art colony. Next slide. Now the big book, that was the little book. The big book happened after the community started celebrating because of the little book. Everybody was suddenly aware that this was a pretty cool thing that happened right here in St. Genevieve, and we should be commemorating it. And so not only did the arts organizations get together, and then wasn't just St. Gen, we had arts organizations in Perryville and I think Jefferson County involved. You guys were here? And Perryville, yeah. Okay. So this all kind of got started, and the tourism organization in town, the predecessor to the downtown groups and all of that, was called Colonial St. Gen. Right? They got involved, and the main person who was handling a lot of that was named Barbara Hankins. And Barbara and Mike Hankins still own, I think, I'm not sure, the Southern Hotel. Has it been sold? Yeah. It's still on it? What's that? Sorry. Not Kathy, yeah.
It's Kathy.
So they own it at the time this was talked about, yeah. Sorry about that. Anyway, a historian wanders in and says, hey, I want to do some information on a book about the art in Missouri. And I'm going to start here in St. Genevieve. And after Barbara and Anna got a hold of him, he had enough information to stop right here. He didn't need to go any further. The story of the art colony captured his attention. The book was released in '04. It was given the Missouri Humanities Council Award the following year. And for the people who had not been aware of this book, there were now a whole bunch of people that were aware of this book. So much so that you can't find it anymore. So what happens is people start collecting colony art all of a sudden. And prices go up. But the collectors then have the ability to have a show. And again, these exhibits all depend on people who have put together a collection of art. The first one that we have listed there, again with Anna and I putting our notes together, is called Regional Dialect. And this was a fellow named Horseman who had collected a whole bunch of regional art. And that show goes to Memphis, Ohio, and Florida, so the whole message of regional art is really getting out there. 2010, Joe Jones gets his own exhibit in his rightful due. And that book includes the art colony, and that section also has credits in the front of it to Mrs. Anna Kirchner for her work in all of the good stuff that's been collected. All of the information that's been handed down needs a place to be. It needs an archive. It needs someone that's going to be its caretaker. And we are very, very fortunate that Anna has filled that role. She has a huge amount of information to share with people who are doing research. And sorry, Anna.
Sounds like she needs to do a talk.
Yeah, well, Anna won't do a talk. I tried to get her to do this one, and she said no way. So, yeah. She says she knows her strengths, and this is not it. So she put the big mouth up here. Yeah. Then there's an art colony, a whole exhibit at Mizzou on just the St. Gen Art Colony. Some of these others include other places, but that one was just St. Gen, and they really, really did a good job on it. Then along came St. Louis University, a collector named Tim Drone. He's the one that owns that portrait of Amy Schweg that I showed you, which is so stunning. Painting the Midwest exhibit, which actually traveled from St. Louis down to Perryville, and a lot of us saw it there. St. Louis Art Museum had Along the Rivers as one of their bicentennial things that they did for St. Louis. And they borrow one of the pieces that I showed you, which is the lime kiln one, the one at the top, by Amy Schweg. Got to travel to St. Louis, got part of the exhibit, got St. Genevieve mentioned again, a lot of write-up that went in as part of that. So because of these art colony books, the Art Colony has gotten a lot of press. I think that's it for that one. Thank you. Next slide. So this is my last slide. Yay! Sorry it's got so many words on it, but this is kind of summing up what we've talked about. The artists that came here, and you'll notice that this is again, more artists dressed up for whatever, everyone's got an apron on at least. And they're out at the Mississippi River back when the transfer ferry was still working. And they're painting, and whoever the gentleman is critiquing the paintings by the other three women. And that's what they did in these art colonies, was someone would critique the work that was done. But they portrayed the dignity of labor, unique qualities of this place, traditions that make us special. The motto about there's something special here is very apropos. Recognizing that, later generations took deliberate steps to study and share the colony's work and history. This July, again, we're commemorating that. We've done that for several years. It's the 25th anniversary of that promenade event. And so we try to keep that story going. And every time we do, we learn more about the colony because there's research that goes into it, and you find out just a little more about the story of what's going on. Original colony art can be seen around town. There's, of course, our post office mural. JD Valley has, the Center French Colonial Life has one painting. The Newell Valley has a few. Shaw House has some of Ziegler's work. And of course, we have 8 pieces now at the St. Genevieve Art Center. And that's why we call it an art museum. We have a corner. It's the art museum. But these are kind of scattered across town. So I want to share with you my worst nightmare. My worst nightmare, I wake up and I open up my email, and it's a message from the National Park Service, from some director that I haven't met, that doesn't exist yet, that's off in the future. And he says, "Dear Mrs. Bach, you now have 30 days notice. I'm alone with the Women's Club. I'm the liaison. Would you please make arrangements to come pick up the 11 pieces from the art colony and find a home for them? Oh, and by the way, can you tell us who at the city we should talk to? Because we have like 50 Roscoe missile arms. We have his desk. What do we do with his desk?" And then there's all of the Charles Reinhardt. There's 7 pieces of Charles Reinhardt that actually tell his story as an artist rather well. What do you do with those? That's my nightmare. The works that we have are scattered around. The largest amount of them are at that J.B. Valley house. There's hundreds of pieces in private collections, private collectors who have an affiliation with St. Genevieve, who care about St. Genevieve, who would love to have their work on public display in St. Genevieve. My friend Roy keeps talking about the tricentennial, 9 years away. The St. Genevieve Art Colony will be 100 years old in 2035. That is right in the center of when the colony was at its height, when it was at its zenith, when it was really cooking along, was 1935, right in the middle of the bicentennial. Wouldn't it be something to be able to dedicate a St. Genevieve Art Colony Museum in St. Genevieve to house not only the collections that we currently have in town, but the collections we could have in town. It's not an easy ask. This would take millions to do, because not only do you need a building, our little Art Center Museum is way too small. I don't even think we could fit the missile horns in there, but we need a building. We would need cooling, heat, temperature control, security, insurance, utilities, and it's not going to make any money. No way. Tourists will come, but it won't pay for itself. So someone has to step it, keep it going. It's quite an undertaking, but wouldn't it be great? And that's all I have to say.